On today's Daily Tea, we speak to Jacob Rees-Mogg about how Keir Starmer's reshuffle went so horribly wrong.
We're also going to be discussing why the Prime Minister has very little control over the deputy leadership vote and why he's now being held over a barrel by the trade unions.
So they do nothing, they are asleep, they are inattentive, and they're there because the unions insist they're required for safety. They are useless and they are a cost. They're on strike, they should be fired.
So we launch into this fresh from the Reform Conference where Jacob Rees-Mogg announced that his daughter Mary had defected to Nigel Farage's party. He joins us now. We'll get on to that, Jacob. But Tim, we must just take a moment. Let's just spare a moment to just think about Keir Starmer right now.
Yeah.
How is he as he tries to piece back together the remnants of his cabinet, get over the departure of Angela Rayner, actually get into work full stop with the tube strikers.
That would be funny, wouldn't it? If Phase 3, he couldn't actually begin Phase 3 because he can't get into central London.
Indeed, he's all right if you live at the office, then you're fine, right? But my goodness me, he's kind of rearranged the deck chairs on the Titanic. But I do get that sinking feeling, Jacob, that he is now, even though Rayner's gone, going to have to spend the rest of his premiership keeping the hard left happy.
We'd already got to the point of in office but not in power, never glad, confident morning again. That came with the failure on welfare, in my view. At that point, he had lost his authority. It drained away from him, and he's in the John Major situation. He can be in power for a long time, in office for a long time, but he can't do anything with that power. He can reshuffle people no one's ever heard of. He can pretend there's a tweak to the left or a tweak to the right, but none of it makes any difference. He's not commanding his party. His majority of 170 is dust and ashes. He is held to ransom by various bits of the party. This is, I'm afraid, the sort of division that the Tory party has been so used to.
And it's worth saying this is not just about Angela Rayner. It happened weeks before with the welfare vote rebellion. And it's interesting that one of the potential left-wing deputy leadership candidates is Louise Haigh, who led that rebellion on reforming welfare.
Well, all the candidates that I can think of who could be deputy leader have an axe to grind against him. So Louise Haigh, who was not held on to, and wasn't really liked by Starmer anyway, when she had some ancient conviction relating to mobile telephones. Emily Thornberry, Lady Newgee, as I think we like to call her, who unexpectedly didn't get a job and has given a very interesting interview saying they're doing foreign policy marvellously, but their domestic policy isn't going quite right. So she's setting her stall out in opposition. And then, of course, Ed Miliband, who is wildly popular within the party at large, was a leader, probably would quite like to be leader again. Actually, as an individual, is, I think, a really first-class man. I like him, think he's thoroughly decent, but my goodness, he's eye-wateringly left-wing. So all the candidates have a different agenda from Starmer, or an axe to grind, or both.
Another one is Rosina Allen-Khan.
Who I used to play football with.
And who I was at university with.
And she's good at karaoke.
She is. I really like her. She's a very nice person. But she is also someone who had to leave government over the Gaza issue. So it adds to your theory these are all people with whom he has some sort of falling out. And I think that is a tribute to the way in which Keir Starmer has run the party. It all goes back to he was elected as a Corbynite, and one of the first things he did was expel Jeremy Corbyn. Now, whether you think that was a good thing to do or not, because it was around anti-Semitism, he does not tolerate internal dissent.
No.
And if you do that within a party, if you try and reduce the big tent to just one small room, then you push a lot of people outside it, and those people are able to create trouble. They're outside the tent doing something in, rather than being inside it. So I sense that part of this is the legacy of Keir Starmer's very wonky, control-freakery way of running government.
This reminds me of Gordon Brown, doesn't it? When a control freak loses control, all you're left with is a freak.
Yeah.
Which is a great quote, isn't it? And I'm sure could be applied to me by my own husband and children. But before we get into who's been reshuffled in and out,
Yes.
the mechanism for this deputy leader election then, it's sort of out of Starmer's control, which makes it even more parlous for him.
And what will confuse some people is that he has a deputy prime minister. He appointed David Lammy to that role.
Yes.
But deputy PM, correct me, Jacob, is a bit of a constitutional fiction.
Oh, you're quite right. It depends who it is. I mean, Baroness Coffey, as she now is, was a serious deputy PM and was regularly helping the Prime Minister. David Lammy, as a deputy PM, is a sop for being demoted.
Right.
And that's been used for every time. Rab Butler, I think, is the first one post-Attlee, who's made deputy PM. Attlee is a proper deputy. And it's given as a sop because he didn't get the leadership. That's how prime ministers use it. It has no constitutional power.
It's within Sir Keir's gift to give that job to someone. But within the constitution of the Labour Party, deputy leader of the party is something quite separate. And that is something that is supposed to be elected by the members. And following changes to the constitution in 2021, if you want to be in the race, you need to get the nomination of 20% of MPs, which now is calculated to be a figure of 80. So there will be a vote among Labour MPs, and you can be on the ballot if you get 80 MPs to support you, or if you can get 5%, that's 33 constituency Labour parties supporting you, or organisations affiliated to the Labour Party, including at least 2 affiliated trade unions. It's wonderfully Byzantine. It makes one's mind go back to the 1981 deputy leadership contest of Tony Benn versus Dennis Healey, in that it's going to be one of those. Ultimately, Labour votes are in the form of blocks, really. MPs, constituency parties, affiliated unions. It's not. It is done on the individual vote, but it kind of functions and moves as power blocks within the wider Labour movement. And what we're all sort of hanging on is, can an anti-Starmer or a Starmer-critical candidate like Thornberry get 80 MPs to support them? If they can, then the leadership election will become a platform for criticism of the direction of the party.
Well, there are all sorts of interesting things about that. First of all, there's a brand new chief whip. It is much harder for a brand new chief whip to stop 80 people signing than it was for the old chief whip who had been around and knew how things worked. I don't think Jonathan Reynolds has a great experience in the whip's office or being a whip. Those dark arts are going to be harder because of the reshuffle. The second thing is you don't want to look at it as the deputy leadership contest, but the succession to Starmer contest. And therefore, there will be lots of ambitious Labour MPs who have been overlooked, who will be thinking, Starmer's only given jobs to his mates and his mates' spouses and his mates' sisters.
Morgan McSweeney's wife was given a job in this
On
reshuffle.
and on it goes.
Yeah.
Rachel Reeves' sister Ellie is now
was
out.
demoted, but she'd been in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not one of those. So who's it going to be next? And that suddenly makes people think of supporting somebody who might give them patronage if Starmer trips over. I think that's very good for Ed Miliband. I think it's probably less good for Emily Thornberry because people don't look at her as a future leader.
They don't. But when the massive majority was first elected, so many of them are new MPs. We couldn't really judge what their politics were. And as a veteran Labour watcher, because I just find, I don't know why, but I find the party fascinating, it's been so interesting to see MPs discover their politics because they're new to Parliament and figure out that, oh, I belong to this tribe or that tribe. And the Welfare Rebellion, and even things like the vote on assisted dying, helped people to place themselves within the party and to sort of say, oh, maybe I'm hard left anti-Gaza. Maybe I'm soft left. I don't want to bring the government down, but I think it's wrong on things like welfare reform. Maybe there is this new grouping of blue Labour MPs like Mike Tapp, who got a job, who think the party should be really socially conservative and should be all about locking people up and deporting people. You know, maybe they belong in that camp. So it's been interesting to see it switch from a party that was really just following Starmer like the Pied Piper of Hamelin, without a very clear agenda, without a very clear philosophy. Now deciding they're part of this group. And members of those groups might drift towards different candidates. So I can see hard left and soft left thinking, I'll vote for Emily because I want to debate.
But surely this all comes from the top. It comes from Starmer practising a unique brand of Marxism, which was advocated by Groucho, not Carl. And that is, here are my principles, and if you don't like them, I have others. So he comes out with a 2020 leadership pitch, which may have been directed by Ken Loach, then pivots into a Blairite position, even though deep down we know he's a human rights lawyer who is effectively a socialist because he proudly declared himself to be one. And then you have all of these Labour MPs. And the Mike Tapps of this world, or the Rosinas, they are all being dictated by their doorsteps. And the doorsteps are telling them two things. First of all, that Starmer is almost universally despised, including by the people that once voted him in. And secondly, that if those Labour MPs do not do what the doorstep asks them to, then they will be going off to either Corbyn, Jack Palance, or indeed Nigel Farage before you can say what happened to John Prescott. Genuinely.
Camilla, I think you've absolutely put your finger on it. And I think this ties in with what Tim is saying, that they're finding their tribe, but that is partly their mailbag and their doorstep, which is telling them what they're currently doing isn't working. And they're all sitting on very small majorities. And this is important because Starmer has a huge majority, but he has no mandate. Why does this matter? It matters because there are dozens into hundreds of MPs who think I will lose my seat at the next election because my majority is 1,000, it's 1,500, unless I suck up to every lobbyist who writes to me. Every time I get 300 letters against a planning application, every time I get 300 letters pro-Gaza, I've got to move in that direction to try of my own efforts to hold on to my seat. And that absolutely undermines the authority of the leader of the party. It won't work for these individuals. The thing that works is actually having a united party that gets things done. But that's not how MPs think.
Mm-hmm.
Can Angela Rayner run again as deputy leader of the Labour Party?
She could, but she won't.
And what's the...
But just to say, the word is that she was happy by Friday to
Yes,
go.
okay. And
It's actually that she was sick of her family being dragged into this. The graffiti was the final straw. The idea that she's going to emerge Pat Phoenix-like from the ashes, that's quite good, I'll save that for a sketch, is just not going to happen.
All right, and then what's the Andy Burnham dimension here? He's supporting Louise Haigh, who I've also played football with in a team,
Really?
along with Rosina. She can belt out a tune as well, to be honest. She was Transport Secretary, as you say, a thorn in Starmer's side, used quite a lot of Rosie Duffield rhetoric around him having a woman problem. I mean, he does have a woman problem, doesn't he? He's had to reshuffle them all out. The only person that survives last week is the Chancellor.
Yeah.
Would you believe? Honestly. So this man who is representing a government of service has been absolutely politically self-serving in keeping in place tearful Rachel Reeves as his resident.
Who he had already emasculated a few days before by moving Darren Jones. There was no need to move Rachel Reeves because Number 10 had already taken charge of economic policy.
She can just absorb all the criticisms of our current state of economic crisis.
But then they've given economic policy back to her because the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, head of the Cabinet Office, is stunningly busy running the mechanics of government.
Yes.
I was in the Cabinet Office for a bit, and all the sort of problems of government come to the Cabinet Office. The Chancellor has to deal with them day by day and is distracted by nonsense. The Chancellor would have been dealing with problems relating to that ridiculous alarm we had yesterday. That's all Cabinet Office stuff.
Yes.
He can't now be thinking about economics. The Chief Secretary of the Prime Minister's staff is very difficult. I mean, Steve Barclay was the Chief of Staff to Boris and Chancellor of the Duchy, and that was quite a difficult role to do. He did as well as anybody could have done, a very capable man, but the volume of work was overwhelming. He couldn't possibly have done economic policy at the same point.
But Darren Jones is being pitch-rolled as the next Chancellor. It was in the Sunday Times and the Sunday Tell. It's been specifically briefed to warm people to the idea that Rachel Reeves won't be there forever.
Yeah, but she will be, whilst she's there, because he's now been distracted by the other chancellorship, the Duchy of Lancaster,
Yes.
he won't be able to think about economic policy. He will be too busy with flood warnings and all the things that come out of the Cabinet Office.
Let's go through the reshuffle then. So we've talked about David Lammy at Justice now, as you say, being given the sort of fillip of being the Deputy PM. We've got the former Home Secretary Yvette Cooper, who on Monday, Prime Minister was absolutely delighted with. She's smashing the gang, she's stopping the boats. By Friday, she's out.
On Monday of last week, it was being reported that friends of Yvette Cooper were saying that Downing Street was a block on her going further in dealing with immigration. Then Downing Street is briefing when she goes that she wasn't being tough enough. They can't both be true.
No.
And it's just indicative of utter muddle at the top.
Utter chaos. So she's gone to foreign, where David Lammy has departed. And in her place now as Home Secretary is Shabana Mahmood. Somebody said she was the first Muslim Home Secretary. Well, she isn't. That's Sajid Javid. But she's the first Muslim female Home Secretary.
Yes.
And the jury seems to be out on how tough she's going to be on immigration. Because on one hand, she once attended a refugees welcome event.
As did Rob Jenrick.
Well, indeed. Back when he was crying about the Rwanda policy that he's now advocating, but we digress. She also was a co-signatory to that letter which tried to stop those Jamaican convicts from being deported. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And she has been outwardly pro-Palestinian. She has advocated the boycott of Israeli goods. So she's not partisan on that issue and now needs to be in charge of the police, in charge of the protests.
I'm sensitive on this because I do think that some of the reaction online that I saw was just nakedly racist. She was brought in to be tough. I would rather give her a chance to see if that is her position rather than second-guessing on the basis of her ethnicity as some thick people online have done.
Fair enough. Jacob?
I'm very glad that we have somebody as Home Secretary who doesn't want to kill people. She voted against the death bill, that awful, awful, wicked death bill. And it's brave of her as a leading Labour figure. So I'm pro her on that. She can't be tough whether she wants to be or not. The conversation's irrelevant. Until you do something about the Human Rights Act, the Refugee Convention, none of this matters. It will all be blocked. And every asylum seeker will go, even if we change the law for our courts, to the European Court. And they won't do that because it's a government of lawyers. Just remind me, in the reshuffle, did the Attorney General get moved?
No, funnily enough, Lord Hermer's still there. Having said that, again, interesting briefing into the Sundays was the idea that Shabana Mahmood might have a look at reforming our relationship with the ECHR, which is not something...
Vivek Cooper said that.
Okay.
That was part of Vivek Cooper's package on Monday.
I was about to say that is not something said by many
Ken
Labour.
Clarke said that.
All right.
I just want to also add that all the people you've mentioned are women. Harriet Harman has said the next deputy leader must be a woman.
Why?
I mean, aside from the general why, all the major officers of state except the Prime Minister are now a woman. Does Harriet want a government entirely of women?
Yes,
is that the only point at which we'll achieve equality?
It kills her.
If there isn't a single man in Parliament.
It absolutely kills Harriet because it completely undermines every statement she's ever made about the power of women in the Labour Party, that they love women so much they've never elected one as leader.
Right. Harriet Harman grew up in the 1970s and no doubt watched the Two Ronnies. And she probably thought that The Worm Who Turned, their sketch on women being in charge of everything, was how the world should be. I think it must have had a profound influence on her.
Diana Dawes as a buxom dictator who was eventually brought down by a mouse.
Work and pensions. Pat McFadden.
Who wanted to be
Jacob.
Chancellor.
He's a solid and safe pair of hands compared to the rest of them, isn't he?
And we're going to be really boring again about the Cabinet Office. He should have stayed in the Cabinet Office. This is the worst change. The Cabinet Office needs detailed, competent administrative capacity. And Pat McFadden actually has that. To change him means that the Cabinet Office will not now be properly run for 3 to 6 months whilst Darren Jones beds in. That is a really silly move. If Pat McFadden had been useless, quite right, move him. But nobody says that. You have a competent minister doing an important job and you reshuffle him because you can't think of anything better to do. This is really bad government. You've got to get not only your policy right, but you've got to get the administration right and be serious-minded about how you make government departments work. And just moving people around because they sort of fall on a conveyor belt is so bad for the country. It means we will be worse governed because of this move.
They may think that he has a better chance of bringing down the welfare bill.
No, he won't, because they can't get any changes through Parliament, and the courts under human rights law cracked down, stopped Tory reforms that were put through by secondary legislation.
A test for Tim Stanley now. Who's the new Housing and Local Government Secretary?
I just saw it on your phone. It's Steve Reed.
Fair enough.
Who shone at agriculture.
Well, to be fair, he was banging on about rivers and sewage, and a few people were listening, but
the
more
farmers'
people.
inheritance tax.
Well,
his
indeed.
job was to go around as a townie explaining to people why farmers weren't going to be taxed as much as they thought they were.
This is the irony. On the countryside, who's campaigned best on farmers? Jeremy Clarkson. Who's campaigned best on rivers? Fergal Sharkey. It's got nothing to do with government. Yeah. Jonathan Reynolds, as we say, has gone from being the business secretary to chief whip. The new business secretary is Peter Kyle of Nigel Farage's akin to Jimmy Savile fame, because he doesn't support the online safety bill. Oh, and he's also the architect of Angela Rayner's being treated differently because she's got an accent.
Were you treated differently because you had an accent, Jacob?
I don't have an accent. I speak the King's English. Thank you very much.
Are
Old
you?
bean.
OK, I'm going to test Jacob Rees-Mogg now. Who's the new Environment Secretary?
Oh, I can't. I mean, I have.
Emma Reynolds.
Never
Oh, yes,
heard
of course. I know Emma Reynolds.
And where did Liz Kendall end up? She's
Liz
gone from
Kendall
work
ended
and
up in the
pensions.
science brief.
Exactly. She's replaced Peter Kyle, just about to call him Jeremy,
And a return from beyond the grave.
for Scottish Secretary Douglas Alexander,
Yes, yes.
who's actually quite a nice chap.
Yes. Yes.
And capable. I mean, I think would have been better to have made him Foreign Secretary, which he'd probably do with some distinction. He's an intelligent man. But bring him back is no bad move. Moving Liz Kendall, it's a mistake not to back your ministers in difficult briefs.
Yes.
Because why will anyone do anything difficult if what you do is then demote them? And we've got to be blunt about this, that awful lot of people have remained but been seriously demoted, including the Foreign Secretary. It's a sad day when the Foreign Secretaryship is a demotion. And they will be sitting in Cabinet thinking, why are we working for this man who
Yes.
doesn't back us up over difficult things?
No.
Yes. Liz Kendall tried to reform PIPs.
And it went
Keir Starmer
Wrong.
U-turned on it and watered down the reform,
Yes.
and now he's sacked her.
exactly.
Yeah, that's right. Boris was always supportive of his ministers who he gave difficult things to do, and it's why he had loyalty from the people who served him closely. His loyalty to Priti Patel was particularly right in my view, but also showed why people had that strength of support for him.
Lucy Powell, who was the leader of the House of Commons, has gone. She was the one who insisted that Angela Rayner's only problem that was she was, quote, so bloody good at her job.
That's right.
Yes.
She also claimed that when Tim Montgomery mentioned the rape gangs, that he was blowing a dog whistle.
Okay, I mean, I think the second one is a mistake. I think the first one is what you say when you're defending a colleague. That
Yes.
if you quoted at me all the things I said about fellow ministers when they were in difficulties when I was leader of the House, I mean, I was even said Matt Hancock was like some footballer, Grealish, I think.
Did you?
I did, yes.
What are you thinking?
Because it's your job, and you've
Yes.
got
Jacob, you didn't
are
need to go that
bound-
far. Poor old Grealish.
Well, I know nothing about football, so it didn't mean much to me.
Well, he's now at
you're-
Everton, isn't he?
the job of the leader of the House is to defend
Yes.
other ministers until they've gone. You're not making the decision. You're not deciding whether they stay. And I'm afraid I can imagine myself using a similar line in
Yes.
defence of a minister in trouble in those circumstances.
So your successor, by the way, is Sir Alan Campbell.
Yes, very capable,
Okay.
long-standing whip. Again, don't muddle with the whip's office. Downing Street never gets this right. Downing Street doesn't understand the House of Commons, and the whips generally do. And Downing Street often thinks you put in some clever high flyer to be chief whip, and what you want is somebody who really understands the Commons and human nature. Why was Patrick McLaughlin such a successful chief whip? Because he understood human nature, understood people, and was really very good at it. Jonathan Reynolds, I think. Michael Gove was not a great chief whip. Michael's been good at almost everything he's done.
You're sullying him. He's coming on the podcast on Friday.
but he won't pretend.
Well, he was disappointed. They took education from him, Cameron, and put him as chief whip, and he resented it ever since.
But he also didn't know who anyone was.
No,
it was
that's
very funny. He was taken round by his deputy, who would whisper to him, "This is Jacob Rees-Mogg," and then he'd say, "Oh, hello, Jacob." it was
Are
very
you
funny.
suggesting for 1 minute that Michael Gove didn't know who you were, Jacob?
We need to tie all this, all these manoeuvres into policy, because people will be wondering. Most people don't care who the Minister for Supplementary Tugboats is. Right?
No.
But the reason why it matters is because there is a budget coming. And the economy is in a mess. Things aren't growing. And Number 10 has figured out that the Workers' Rights Bill, supported by Angela Rayner, now gone, could be a block to growth. Workers' Rights Bill, things like cracking down on 0 hours contracts, more support for trade unions. So one reason why Peter Kyle's been given his job at business is because Kyle is a big Blairite, right? And we all anticipate that he wants to water that bill down. And they might have got away with it had it not been for, well, trade unions, we'll come on to that in a second, but the deputy leadership contest.
Yes.
Because as I mentioned, there's that curious quality of the different electoral blocks, the parliamentary party, the constituency party, and the trade unions. The trade unions historically have been sort of sensible small c conservative and will support the leadership, unless there's a material thing that they want that the leadership's not giving them. So, if we're going to enter a deputy leadership contest and at the same time Keir Starmer is looking to water down the workers' rights bill, trade unions might take a favourable look at an anti-Starmer candidate.
There are all sorts of things you can do in terms of the management of parliamentary business. The bill isn't yet through. That you can recommit to committee, you can delay progress in the House of Lords, you can spin things out, you could even decide that it's time for prorogation and you need a new parliament and the bill. That you can handle things more subtly than just saying we're pulling the bill. You can just let it get caught up in the weeds. You can fail to move a programme motion and say it was a terrible mistake, and then it goes on.
Critics within the party will notice that's happening. They're not fools.
They will, but nobody else will.
Right.
Nobody notices the detail of parliamentary business. And there's a reason why I wouldn't have changed the business managers, because you've now got new business managers who won't necessarily understand how easy it is to do those sorts of things. Campbell would definitely have known how to do that.
Yes. Now, let's just move on to the unions briefly. Once a proud member of the National Union of Journalists, I don't mind telling you, Tim, that I was a little bit like you back in your early years. I was militant.
Were you a pinko too?
No, don't be ridiculous.
Oh, my Lord.
I was a pinko for a day when we voted to strike, and as I was in the union, I went onto a picket line, only to discover that most people didn't go on the picket line and actually just worked from home. And I thought, hang on a minute, I put my head above the parapet here. This isn't collective.
Academic unions are exactly the same.
Oh,
you don't join the picket line, you just go and mark.
And then they just kept on overcomplicating everything, the union. I just thought, oh, God, a unionism isn't for me. So I did it briefly under the ownership of Richard Desmond, which was a bit tricky at the time, although compared to the people that ended up buying the Express Group, Reach, he was positively sort of Angela Rayner-esque.
So I'm the only Conservative here. That's quite reassuring.
You can be a Conservative trade unionist. Of course you can.
And so we have the trade union. Now, what I think is interesting about how the tide has turned, particularly in light of this tube strike, is how many angry people joined me on my overland train this morning. And I just don't think you can get away with this anymore. I don't think you can get away with having been offered a pay rise, which they say isn't enough because it's not in line with inflation. What? When inflation was at 11%? Nobody else in the private sector has been given anything like a 3.4% pay offer. You now want to work 32 hours, not 35, and you're quite happy to take this strike action and hold this capital to ransom, despite the fact that you and me and the people in the gallery and everyone listening to this who's in a job contributed their hard-earned taxpayers' cash to a £3.6 billion bailout of Transport for London only 3 years ago. Who on earth has sympathy? I'm sorry, even the most ardent of pinkos, to use your word, Jacob. This doesn't wash.
No, I completely agree, and you should file a lot of them. Most of the tube lines are now automatically operated. They have observers in the cab, not drivers. Just fire them. You don't need them.
Golly.
That's a good job, isn't it?
What?
I wish I could do that job
Sitting
in
in
the office. I'm the official observer.
Yes, you have to observe. Observe us
They
right.
also do it stunningly badly. So Boxing Day 2023, a body is on the line. They've got these observers. I think it was the Jubilee line, but it doesn't particularly matter which line. Got these observers in automatic trains. 4 of them run over the body without noticing. So they do nothing. They are asleep. They are inattentive. And they're there because the unions insist they're required for safety. They are useless and they are a cost. They're on strike. They should be fired.
And I wouldn't like to agree, but I think they've pushed their hand so far that now people will agree. I like the idea of people being present on trains.
Docklands Light Railway is running today, as I understand it, perfectly safely. How many drivers has it got?
But it's nice to have
0.
a guard on a train. It's nice to have a human being
Look,
on a train.
it's nice to have a Pullman carriage and to be brought a cup of coffee and perhaps your dinner.
Which is how you travel regularly to Somerset.
Of course, if I can't get a private train. But Lord Salisbury used to come into London on a private train. I think the last Prime Minister to have done this. But that's an expense, and it doesn't make travelling by train any safer or any more efficient.
And it's not just the strikes, we should add, it's also the public sector pay increases.
Yes.
Because I mentioned the budget, and that's part of the answer as to where's the money gone.
But that's the other reason why people are tearing their hair out. We're giving them more money and they're still going on strike.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any difference to sit down at the table. junior doctors, now resident doctors, RMT workers, now tube workers. The more money you give them, they're still emboldened to strike.
But it's a really important point. I don't have the figures in front of me, but listeners can look them up. In the last quarterly government accounts, the increase in pay for the public sector was about double the rate of inflation.
Wow.
So that either means lots more people are being taken on, which is possible, or it means that there are a lot of above-inflation pay rises going through. It's a big part of the reason that the deficit is not coming under control.
Final thought for the Conservative sitting in front of us. So, your one and only daughter, Mary, has defected to a party which, frankly, just to again use your phrase, is a bit pinko, isn't it, on renationalisation, reindustrialisation. What have you done wrong here, Jacob Rees-Mogg?
I think I'd say two things. One is that I've always thought that my children are independent entities,
Love
and
that.
therefore I'm very pleased that they are making up their own mind about things. Though I would add a caveat to that. When it comes to religion, their mind needs to be made up by the Catholic Church, not by me,
Very good.
but by Holy Mother.
3 Catholics
and
at
it
the
is-
table.
And it is, of course, Our Lady's birthday today, so a great, important feast day. The other thing that I would say is this is the worst teenage rebellion that I get. It's not the end of the world, is it? I think I can just about cope.
Are you going to follow in her footsteps?
No, I'm not following in her footsteps. I mean, I like and admire Nigel Farage, think very highly of him. I think he's done a remarkable thing. Tim, I very much liked your piece today saying that everybody's now becoming right-wing. I don't think it's quite true of the Labour Party. But if the right can unite, then we can have an enormous majority at the next election. We're talking national government, 1935 scale majority, when we can restore the country. And that's very exciting, but that means the Tories and Reform working together.
And who would be the conduit for that? Perhaps yourself?
I don't view myself as a conduit. No, I think the two leaders have to work something out between them, and so that's Nigel and Kemi.